often do you think people should be having sex?
And if you're going to date a man, regardless of who you are, he needs to feel needed. A relationship is only as strong as two people are able to face the world as a united team. If you have any sort of insecure attachments, you are going to over-rely on your partner to make you happy.
Welcome to Biohack-it, where we are redefining wellness for the modern era. I'm your host, Iman Hasan, here to help you optimize your mind, body, and spirit. Every Thursday, we dive deep into biohacking, holistic health, and cutting-edge science, breaking down the latest research on longevity, chronic disease prevention, and much more. We're challenging outdated wellness norms and having authentic, unfiltered conversations about women's health, fertility, longevity, and everything in between. Follow Biohack-it now and start living your best, healthiest life on your own terms. Remember that curiosity heals. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Biohack-it. My guest today is actually somebody I brought on to season 1 and absolutely fell in love with this woman, and she just came out with a book that's a New York Times bestselling author now, and so I had to bring her on for round 2. Jillian Turecki is a sought-after relationship coach, my favorite person in the relationship space, personally. No bullshit, straight to the point. She has one of the most incredible podcasts, Jillian on Love, where she breaks down things that you're feeling. And I promise you guys, if you're going through something in your life, personal situation, a relationship with a partner, you just need to be lifted up and need a pep talk with your best friend, Jillian is your person. So thank you for coming back to Biohack-it.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here again.
I love this book.
Thank you.
I saw you when you had just released it and you did the Miami kind of opening for it, and we were there and you were with Valeria on the panel, and just to hear your personal story about how it all began for you.
It's a crazy story. I forgot that you were there. Yes, I know. It all began, it began many years ago when I started teaching yoga, over 20 years ago. And I would say that that's really like the first seeds to everything of wanting to work with people and their relationship with themselves, and also my own journey and my own path towards understanding my psychology and understanding meaning in life. And then in 2014, I went through a very unfortunate experience where I was married for 2 years, and it was a very difficult marriage. I always say that our relationship leading up to marriage was about 90% really, really strong and 10% problematic. But that 10% was profoundly problematic. It was like the giant red flags that I was not in any way, I wasn't programmed to pay attention to that, let's just say. And so the marriage was really, really painful. And on the morning that I was having a miscarriage, he decided that he was going to text me and say he wasn't coming home. He was going to stay at his parents. And also my mom was dying of lung cancer. So he knew this. So it was the ultimate abandonment. And that day was the day that my whole life fell apart. And so I became obsessed with two things. One, how am I going to get myself out of this hole that I was in, and then what the hell does it take to make a relationship work, like really work and last? I became obsessed, and I felt through working with some people and reading, I felt very called to, once I figured out what happened between my husband and I was really able to process that. I thought, this is something that I have to teach others.
And this moment that essentially like brought you to your knees, it kind of like really kind of make you feel like your world is basically caved in, right? Because you were like, any stability or anything that I've known is not there anymore.
Yeah.
I went through something similar in very similar in a previous marriage, actually. But those are the moments that teach us how to rise.
Yeah.
And show us really what we're capable of and what our strengths really are.
Yes. And, I always say, I don't want to romanticize those kind of traumatic moments. Growth is not something to romanticize, but it really, one thing that I've learned is that, I've learned the strength that I have, but I've also just learned that as human beings, we really are very resilient. And that is, that is a fork in the road, which is you're either going to do everything you can, as messy as it is, to climb yourself out of that hole and to get to the other side, or not. And I really knew that I had to make that event, that day, mean something other than what you would think it would mean, which is, life is meaningless and you can't trust men, or you can't trust yourself and you're not good enough and life is terrible. I had to make it mean something more.
Did you ever get an apology?
I'm trying to think. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't any, probably, no.
Yeah.
No, I never got an apology for that. No.
It just sometimes shocks me that people lack such basic awareness of, even if, like, it's like, I don't have the courage to break up with you in person, but not thinking about the impact it will have on the other.
Yeah.
And the consequences of our actions.
Yeah, it's quite unbelievable. I think part of what, and the nice thing is, it's 10 years, I can speak about this without any emotional charge, but it truly is unbelievable. And so therefore, thank God I'm not with him. And then also, that had nothing to do with me. That had everything to do with him. That's something that he has to live with, not me. Yeah.
How did you land on the 9 hard truths? Like, why 9?
Yes. Well,
know?
It's funny. I was conceptualizing this book since 2019.
Right.
And I wrote it in 2023. So when I was conceptualizing it, I was thinking, is it 3 truths? Is it 5 truths? 9 does happen to be one of my favorite numbers, but I wasn't attached to the number. I was just attached to what I was actually going to leave behind. And so I went through a lot of iterations of those 9 truths, and sometimes they were 11, and sometimes they were 7. And so it took me about 2 years, and I just felt like these were the 9. It just had to be.
And which one of the 9, I know we spoke about this at dinner the other day as well, but I want to tell the audience, which one was the hardest truth? Like, which one is going to be your hardest truth for most people reading this?
Well, I will say that it depends on everyone is going to have a different experience with these truths. But the first one and the last one, are the ones that kind of like bookend it. The first one is It Begins With You, which is the title of the book, which is basically this hard truth of understanding that any change that you want to make in your life, you have to make it, and you can't. And when it comes to your love life, we have to be really radically honest with ourselves about the choices that we've made and the mistakes that we've made and the things that we wish we could do differently. And this is not about blame. I really try to steer people away from blaming others and away from blaming themselves. This is really just about seeing that you're actually more powerful than you think. And when I went through that terrible time in my life, I realized that yes, I needed help, and I needed to lean on friends and family, and I needed to lean on a therapist and whatnot, but I also realized that the only one who was really going to get, I had to take the initiative. I had to make the change. And I think that that's going to be difficult for some people, but empowering. Sorry.
No, she's so
nice,
cute. I love
sweetie
her.
Dog. And then the last one, you have to make peace with your parents. That's an ongoing.
Always. That's
ongoing.
Yeah.
I believe that our most challenging task as a human being is to make peace with our parents. And let's just say you have a great relationship with your parents and you don't have a difficult parent, or you don't have a difficult relationship with them. For you, making peace with your parent might be freeing yourself from who you thought or who you think you have to be in order to get approval from your parents, and instead being who you know yourself to be. And so learning how to beat to your own drum, learning how to forgive a parent that, maybe was a terrible parent. I add something in the chapter, if anyone has been severely abused or molested, I am no way suggesting that you forgive your parent, but how do you live your life not having the hold that maybe one of your or both of your parents have had on you, because your adult relationships will reflect your childhood, and so for better or for worse. So it's really about examining the story that you have about your childhood or about one or both of your parents and looking at it through the lens of your adult self rather than through the lens of your child self, which is what we do. We tend to look at our childhood through the lens of us, of being a child, whether it's 15 or 9 or 3.
So it's so crazy you say that, because so one piece I'm going to go back to is when I was at your event and I heard your backstory for the first time and kind of how you landed on It Begins With You and kind of what inspired your journey. So I was in a marriage when I was in my 20s. It was a very abusive marriage, and my low point, in a similar way, I got pregnant and I got dropped off to have an abortion, forced abortion. And that for me, and my mom was getting sick with cancer a couple of years later. And that whole combination of things just left me so scarred. And I did not realize all of this, what it had done to me, until recently, now that I'm trying to start a family again.
Yeah.
And I have this mental block around wanting to have a child naturally and all this stuff. So I'd made all these blocks in my head. I was so stressed out because I was so scared of what that one encounter had made me feel about this whole journey about becoming a mother, because that was my first interaction.
Yes.
And then the second piece, which is so impactful to me, the last couple of years, I've really been working through, both my parents have now passed. My mom passed away from cancer. I have been working through a lot of forgiveness to try to see things from their lens. That doesn't mean everything is okay.
Yeah, no.
But I showed them love and gratitude that they brought me to this world, and I have turned out the way that I have, right? At the end of the day, I'm a byproduct of these two humans.
Yeah.
And it's not that you look at them and say, hey, you guys were perfect, but it's more like an acceptance of they met you where you are, where they could on their journey.
Yes. One of the things that I think that we do that happens to I think part of the human experience is as we enter adulthood, there's almost a grieving that happens because we're no longer, I believe that a parent's responsibility when you're a child is you meet the child where they are, not the other way around. But when we're adults, we have to start seeing our parents as not just parents. It's not just our parents. We have to start seeing them as actually people and start relating to them differently. And that can be difficult because there's always going to be that child inside of us that wants mommy or daddy to be there for us and to make us safe and to tell us everything's going to be okay and to be sort of superhuman. And what you said was very powerful. I wouldn't be here sitting here today, had I had the father that I deserved or that I needed. And there are people who get everything they want in childhood and doesn't guarantee a good life. And so it's partly seeing that, yes, I carried some wounds from my relationship with my father, and I had to finally open my eyes to how that was impacting my relationships, some relationships with men, not all, particularly my marriage. And I had to really face it. But I also I was always afraid of my father, and I really had to face that. And I had to start to see him differently. And that wasn't for him, that was for me.
If you're serious about your long-term health, there's one vitamin you're probably not getting enough of. No matter how clean your diet is, nearly 97% of people in the Western world are deficient in vitamin K2, and most don't even realize it. That's why K2 is nearly non-existent in modern diets, but it plays a huge role in heart health, circulation, bone strength, and even brain function. So here's why it matters so much. Low K2 levels can show up as weak bones, stiff muscle, bruising, wrinkles, and even forgetfulness and brain fog. It also is linked to major cardiovascular and bone health issues down the line. That's why I'm so excited about Just Thrive's K27, the only K2 supplement on the market that comes from 100% organic chickpea natto, the best source of K2. Delivers 320 mcg of pharmaceutical grade K27, the optimal daily dose. Has guaranteed potency so your body actually absorbs what it needs. It's microbiologist formulated, clinically tested, and supports your heart, bones, brain, and circulation at the source. I've made it a part of my daily routine, and I think you'll love it too. Check it out at justthrivehealth.com and use code Biohack-it for a discount and enjoy. You know, it's so powerful what you just said. So on this journey of exploring myself and understanding certain things, I don't think I'd be who I am today without the parents that I had, because I think your soul, from a spiritual aspect, chooses a path for you. And then they match you with the souls of your parents, who have to give you, I say, the right amount of trauma. And I'm not saying, you know, some people might have been really abused and like, how can you say that? But your soul chooses almost that journey, and then you choose how to come out of that the other side. Yeah. And I don't think you and I would be where we are in our careers, in our professional lives, or the kind of women we become without those parents.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And I got into this work, especially personally for me, I came to a lot of these revelations through plant medicine. And I remember doing one ayahuasca ceremony, Jillian, and I saw my life almost in 3D, that I'm watching my life about, why did I choose these parents? Why was my childhood like this? What are the experiences I went through to get me to this point? And it was crazy being an observer to your life. And I was like, shit, wow. I never seen it from that perspective. And that brought me so much peace.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. You know, we walk around sort of like wounded kids inside of these adult bodies, blaming our childhoods. And look, there are things that happen that we would have every right to feel the way that we do. I'm not interested in, you don't have to forgive. I'm not here to tell you who to forgive and who not to forgive. I just want you to feel free and to have healthy relationships.
And that's what I think this book does such a great job at breaking down. It's like the 9 things that I need, like you say, it begins with you. You need to explore within yourself and get really, really clear. So when I was reading it, another exercise that I did, as each truth came up and I went through it, I wrote down the things that I think at this stage in my life I need to work on in that category.
Oh, wow. I love that you did that.
So I kind of made it like an exercise.
I love that.
And then I checked in with myself and I said, okay, every few months I'm going to check in and see how much further have I worked on this? Have I come to some sort of, realization with it?
The book was made for you.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And I feel that that's the beautiful stuff about this work that you're doing is, and even your podcast, I think you are very matter of fact and straight to the point. And that is what people need. They don't want to be like, I think too many people sugarcoat around things. You're just like, listen, it's up to you what you do with this information, but here's the information for you. And then how did you personally start? Like for me, it was plant medicine. For you, how did you start that healing process with your parents? Like what were the little switched on that light?
Yeah, for me, it was just my father. I was very close to my mom, but and then she died, and that was very difficult for me, extremely difficult, and continues to be difficult. Honestly, it started really because even though I'd been practicing yoga for so long, I still was controlled by the story. And I was controlled by my perspective of him. And so it was really when I started to do this work and became a coach and started to do this relationship work that I started to understand the power of our belief system. I started to understand the power of stories and the things that we tell ourselves. And it's really through this work that I developed a deeper self-awareness, but it was not an overnight process. It was a process. And he actually passed away while I was writing the book, while I was writing that chapter. And so I do really strongly believe that even after your parents pass, like you can continue to do that inner work and in fact, in some ways it's easier because I don't know, for me, it softens my attitude towards him now that he's passed, you know? I have like a lot more compassion now that he's gone.
So it happened the same way for me with I was closer to my mom than my dad. My dad didn't speak to me for the last like 8-9 years. But when they both passed, I almost felt, they were fighting with each other like all the time, but I felt a sense of relief because I was like, I can finally be who I need to be versus regulating them and their traumas and their nervous systems and stuff. And I felt that's really when my healing began.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense.
You know,
That makes sense. It totally makes sense that you can feel free from that.
And that's when I started exploring and trying to have that empathy and compassion and softening towards them and understanding where they came from when they were around.
Yes.
But without regrets.
Yes, without regrets. But yeah, so I think that's a very powerful example of how there's an opportunity to heal. You know, if you have a very troubled relationship with your parent, like you did with your father, and to feel some relief after they go is okay, you know? It's okay. It's okay to feel that.
And I think that is what also, I think you've narrated so well in this book is that concept of you do things at your own pace, you do them when you're ready, but these are things that you should explore within yourself.
Yes, exactly.
So I was looking at all this like research around relationships, and one thing came to me, and I wanted to ask you this. So a 2023 study from the Pew Research Center found that 51% of Americans believe in love at first sight.
Oh, interesting.
What do you think about that?
I think that's the influence of romanticism on our culture.
100%. I read that. I'm like, 51% of Americans believe
in
this?
love at first sight. Yeah. Yeah, I believe in lust at first sight. I believe that there can be a deep connection. But I know about 3 people who experienced that, oh my God, it feels like love at first sight. And they all went through terrible breakups. So, what does that mean? So love at first sight. Love at first sight is not the same thing as actually being able to sustain a relationship by having the skill that is love, that is to love. And I do believe that anyone can learn that skill. But yeah, I mean, I believe that that's the role of romanticism and rom-coms. And I don't believe that you can love anyone who you don't know. If I were to really go down the wormhole of spirituality and certain things that I may or may not believe in, I mean, I guess I could really buy, our souls recognized each other, but that could also end up being the worst relationship, the most toxic relationship you've ever been in your life. So what does that actually really mean?
And I think
is that actually love?
Is that actually love, or is that just the lesson you have to go through?
Yeah, or some sort of familiarity. This person reminds you of the parent who was terrible to you. I don't know.
Well, most of the times that's true, right? A lot of the times when we have unresolved issues at home, unresolved relationships with our parents, we choose that same friction in a partner to relive that. Yeah,
not always. I know that in the zeitgeist, they like to say that that's always going to happen. That is not true. It does not always happen, but yes, it's common for sure.
And I definitely experienced that. There were things that were just unresolved, and I relived it, and I was like, wait, I'm making really bad choices in men here. Yeah. I need to stop.
Maybe it has something to do with the fact that my father hasn't spoken to me in 9 years.
And I'm like, I'm choosing this is not right. My relationship choices were terrible until I met my husband. Yeah. So I was just like, maybe we should reconsider all this.
Yeah.
But I just found it fascinating that
it is fascinating.
People also romanticize. And what do you think when anybody listening to this, when they're looking for a partner, doesn't matter, male, female, whatever it may be, what are the red flags that they should look out for?
So the lowest hanging fruit are you don't feel comfortable when you're with them. Now, sure, there's an argument for, well, I don't feel comfortable when I'm with anyone. I'm nervous, I'm anxious. Great, okay. But let's just say you're spending more time with them and more time with them. You don't feel comfortable being yourself. You don't feel comfortable expressing an opinion. You just don't feel comfortable.
Right.
So that's definitely a red flag. Another red flag is if they're displaying any signs of rage or alcoholism or drug addiction, getting easily angered and any sort of a violent temper. Those things are huge red flags. Other red flags would just be, well, some red flags to consider are maybe they don't have one of your, they have one of your deal breakers, which is what I always tell people they need to figure out. What are your deal breakers? So maybe you meet someone who's perfect in all ways, but they have one of your deal breakers. That's a red flag. Another red flag would be they are just not investing in you.
People aren't talking about this enough, but I truly want to optimize your health. We need to be paying attention to EMFs. We are constantly plugged in, surrounded by wireless signals, radiation, frequencies that our bodies have never ever been able to handle at this level. Research has shown that EMFs can disrupt sleep, impact cellular function, and contribute to long-term health issues. Yet we're rarely talking about this or how to protect ourselves from this. This is why I was so excited when I first discovered Lila Quantum Tech. I met them 2 years ago at a biohacking conference in Austin and was absolutely blown away by the founder, Philip Mon. Hearing him on stage and learning about quantum energy technology completely shifted my perspective. I knew I had to try it for myself. And now, 2 years later, I'm so excited to have them partner with me on my podcast. One of my absolute favorite products, the Heal 360 capsule, which I wear on my quantum necklace every day. This isn't just any pendant. It's scientifically designed and quantumly charged to support your body's natural ability to heal, energize, and protect itself from harmful influences. People using it have reported more energy, mental clarity, better stress resilience, and relaxation, deeper sleep, and faster recovery. And that is also the feedback I got from our supper club when I gifted it to all our guests. Lila Quantum Tech is leading the way in quantum frequency healing with products designed to neutralize EMFs, enhance cellular function, and help your body operate at its best. I personally felt the difference since wearing Heal 360 capsule, and I think you'll love it too. Check it out at lilaq.com and use code Biohack-it for a discount. That is LEELAQ.com and use code Biohack-it. Happy healing.
They're just not investing in you emotionally. So you're getting to know them, you're spending time with them, but they're not reaching out, they're not making plans with you. You kind of feel like they're not that into you. That's a huge red flag and requires examination and exploration. My whole thing is that I want to encourage people to, especially women, because I think women are so conditioned to not communicate and to just play the game and just to make it be strategic so that they get the person. But if that's happening, just say, hey, it feels like you're just not really that into this. Is that true?
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about that so that we can call it.
I think women have somehow settled for this thing that they may be an option amongst many. Mm-hmm. And I think we have done ourselves a disservice. You should never be an option for somebody.
No, never. I mean, look, when you have a first date,
that's
right?
Yeah.
That's, the fact that things need to be locked down. No, and everyone should be an option the first few dates.
Yeah, and I have this when I was single and also like when my girlfriends are single, I was like, go on at least 10 dates with somebody.
Yeah.
Right? Because the first time you're just romanticizing everything.
Yeah.
Really get to know them in different scenarios, in different situations.
Yes.
Are they having a bad day at work?
Yeah.
Do they have an argument with their mom? How do they treat their family? How do they treat how do they talk about their ex? But that will come over a duration of multiple conversations.
Yeah. And that reminds me, another red flag is they don't have a good friend group.
That's a huge one.
And here's what I mean by that. You don't have to have a big friend group. When I say not a good friend group, meaning the people they have in their life are not really good people. You don't like them. And this is so important. You don't know a person until you've met their friends and family. Yeah. And because you have to see how they interact with their world in order to understand who they are. And so what a lot of people do in the beginning when they're really into someone, they get like in a bubble. Yeah. right? And they get obsessive and they play house with each other. And then it's like, okay, let's move on to our other lives. But you don't know someone until you actually see them interacting with the world. So I think a lot of early dates should include friends and doing things with other people.
And in groups.
And in groups.
And also, what do these people think about them? Not that their opinion's the last thing that matters, but it is important to see people who've been in their lives for a long time, how they view this person.
Yeah, absolutely. And how they interact and the kind of friendships that they have and what's really important to them. Because ultimately it boils down to a value system.
Right.
And so you have to observe that. And so those are the biggest red flags. I'm not thrilled about someone speaking terribly about their ex. To the point where they don't take any responsibility. Oh, my ex is crazy, my ex is this, my ex is that. You really want to make sure that if you are starting to date someone, that they have processed their past relationship.
And they're not processing with you.
And they're not, it's very well said, and they're not processing with you so that you play shrink and therapist and coach, and then you're a friend, and then you're a shoulder to cry on. No.
Or become collateral damage.
Yeah. Or become collateral damage.
Which happens so often.
Yes.
You talked about something about value systems. So what do you think about people with very different worldviews, whether it's politics, culture, or ideology of some sort? Like, do you think they can have a healthy relationship?
Well, sure. Look, there's lots of different types of relationships out there. And so is it possible? Yes. Is it easier to have a similar worldview? Absolutely. Differences are important. Differences are what create chemistry. Things that are the same are what create friendship. So, and you want friendship and you want chemistry in a relationship. So differences are important. It really just depends. So like, I find it very inspiring to think about being with someone who thinks about things differently than I do in a lot of ways, so that it opens my mind. But a worldview and values, like, you have to have some similarities there. It's very, very important. You have to agree on what a life well lived is, and I do think that seeing the world through a somewhat similar lens, I think does create a closeness and a camaraderie between two people that is very, it really helps with longevity.
It also helps you work towards
longevity of the relationship. Yes.
And I feel like the longevity piece is so important because it helps you work towards the same goal.
Yes.
How you both get there will be different. It's unique to you because you all have your own path to do it.
Yeah.
But I do think you need to agree to what is the end destination, even if it changes along the way, because then two people are actively working towards the same thing. You might do it at different paces, you might do it in different ways, but at least that's shared.
You have to have a common vision and a common goal. Have to share that. It's for longevity of a relationship. This is what sustains it. This is what keeps a couple going when they go through hard times. It's bonding. A relationship is only as strong as two people are able to face the world as a united team. Yeah. And once you're not united, things get very
ugly, very
ugly, very quickly. Yeah.
Do you think, like, when looking back, at your personal relationship and stuff, what were the red flags that you didn't see that when you got into this work, you're like, damn it, that was all red flags right there?
Well, interesting that you asked that question. I think I felt all the red flags, but I suppressed them because the alternative would have been to bring it up and possibly lose him, and I didn't want to. So I think our bodies tell us. Yeah. I really, really do. I felt red flags. There were just a lot of times, too many times, where he would shut down when I really needed him the most. And unfortunately for me, I didn't know that these were needs that were okay to have. There were also times where I was needy. So I can admit that, that there were times when I was needy and that maybe overwhelmed him. But the times where he really did not show up for me were where I can look back and say with utter certainty, those were not when I think about those really big red flags, those were not times where I was being needy. Those were times where I needed and deserved lots of love. Yeah. And he would shut down. And I just will never, ever, ever tolerate shutting down ever again. It's grounds for breakup for me. That's how strongly I feel about it.
I feel a lot of times when women are needy, it's because they're not getting the love that they need.
Not always. Sometimes. No, not always.
But in a
Neediness
lot of
exists.
Yes.
Neediness exists. Yes. Are there circumstances where you're feeling needy because you're not getting the love that you deserve? Absolutely. Are there a lot of circumstances like that? Absolutely. But let's not forget that neediness, not because you're not getting your needs met, but because you don't know how to meet your own needs, exists. Right. And we cannot forget that, especially because our first attachment is our parent. And then what we do, regardless of what your attachment style is, what we do on an unconscious level is when we meet someone, we want them to fulfill the role of our parent in some ways. We want them to just be there for us. We want to sort of shift and transition the responsibility of our biggest attachment from our parent to our partner. If you have any sort of insecure attachment, specifically if it leans more towards anxious, you are going to over-rely on your partner to make you happy, to make you safe, to make you secure, when there are things that you need to learn how to do for yourself. And that could be even the littlest things like, oh my God, I have to, I'm throwing a party and I have to go get, a bunch of waters or wine or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, I don't know, I don't want to go do it. Oh, honey, will you go do it? That's neediness. And then there's just the neediness of feeling unsafe in the world, not feeling safe in your body, not knowing how to really meet your needs. And maybe you get by when you're single, but as soon as you're in a relationship, you're like, here, I'm passing the baton to you to do this all for me. And that exists. People do that. And that's neediness.
All the time. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, I guess. Yeah, because there are times that women or men, both. I've had that with my husband when we first got together. He didn't know how to communicate like certain things that would come across as needy, and I would just shut down. I'm like, I don't understand. I don't have the capacity for this right now. Yeah. And then over time, we worked on our communication styles. I'm like, hey, if you need something from me, the best way to approach something like me personally is just ask me and just be direct, and I'll be able to be like fit it in or figure it out and stuff. Yeah. But sometimes when someone nags me, I just like shut down. I can't deal with it.
Yeah. It's very difficult.
I'm like, I don't have room for this.
Yeah. And I think particularly for women, it's extremely difficult to delineate between, is this me, are these needs valid versus am I being needy? And that's why I try to break it down in the book. It's, of course your needs are valid, you need love, you need all of that, but think about like the little things. Like, do you feel safe in your body? Are you making your partner responsible for your happiness? Are you making your partner responsible in ways that like you wanted your parent to be responsible? Right. That's different than, you know what? I need love right now. And this is how I need love. And when you're in a secure relationship, you can have the conversation. Like, does this feel like needy to you? Is this too much for you? Like, okay, here's where I just cannot budge, and here's where I'm willing to hear your point of view on what you think is happening here. So it's a journey of feeling safe in your body, because a lot of women then will go to hyper independence. I don't need anyone. No, we need each other. Yeah. There's going to be your next question. We need each other. We need love. And if you're going to date a man, regardless of who you are, he needs to feel needed. That's very important.
Absolutely.
Every man who I've ever worked with, regardless of how he identifies, he says, I need to feel like I am needed in some way.
So it's so funny you bring that up. That was my next question. Yeah. And B, I was a victim of hyper independence because of what had happened to me in my 20s. Yeah. And I'd hit basically rock bottom at that point, and I said, I will never need anybody again. Like, no one's ever going to make me feel this way. So then I got programmed to be like, I don't need anybody. But
We
then
made that decision.
And that was completely toxic in my second marriage, because my husband was like, what do you mean? And it made him feel not wanted in the beginning. It made him feel not loved. And that was not my intention at all. But I had this unprocessed trauma going on in the back that was playing like a movie. And now I've become so much better at being like, babe, I need you for this. Could you help me? Or, you know, I'd love your input on this because I'm not sure. So that changing the way I speak and address things has helped us tremendously.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, I feel really important. And he should feel important because I do actually need him for those things. But I had overridden this need that I needed him for things with like a fear response from my trauma to be like, no.
Yeah, I know. So you just brought up, we talked about red flags. You just brought up a green flag. Being able to talk to your partner.
Yes.
Just being able to talk about this stuff with your partner. That's like probably the biggest green flag. Like, oh, I realize I'm doing this and doing that. Well, this makes me feel okay. Wow. Like, I realize that this is a trauma response, and just being able to talk about it.
Right.
Do you know how many people are in relationships and they can't talk to each other? Unbelievable. Because they're too busy judging. They're too busy shutting down. They're too busy trying to be enough for each other. They're too busy avoiding.
I think that is probably the thing that's helped us most, is having this very like direct communication style. But I will preface this with one thing. I don't just randomly go up and bring up stuff to him. I ask him because he like has a really busy work schedule as well. I say, hey, can we chat about certain things when you have time? And he says the same thing to me. He comes up to me, he's like, hey, when do you have time? Can we chat about a few things?
Yeah.
And then we find the time, and then and sometimes he just wants to chat about life. It's not really a big conversation, but he wants to have that moment to connect with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I say, hey, could we, carve out some time to go over a couple of things I wanted to address, or things that I need to work on with you and stuff. And that's how we resolve it.
Yes.
So it doesn't have these mass implosions that happen.
Right.
Or if there is a mass implosion, sometimes that happens, we always ask each other, is everything okay? Like, why? Like, where is this coming from? Because I don't think it's coming from me.
Yeah.
Or he says, I don't think it's coming from me. So where is your stress coming from?
Yeah.
And how can I help you with that?
Yeah. That's the name of the game.
But Jillian, most of the people, like, you coach couples, right? All the time. How do you get them to this point?
And single, a lot of singles.
And single people, yeah.
All of them. Well, first, it's always about helping people understand each other's, speaking of needs, each other's needs.
Right.
I'm always astounded, and I can reflect on my own relationships too, how many people who live together under the same roof and maybe call themselves, each other's partner or spouse, and they don't really know what the other person truly needs to feel important to the other. They don't know what the other person needs to feel like sexy to the other person. And so the first step when I work with couples is always to help people understand what their needs are, and to explain it to each other, and then to help them to strategize with them to help them meet each other's needs more.
That's important that you said that. So we have an amazing communication coach that we work with.
Oh, great.
And she's an individual coach, and then she is also a communication coach. Like, that's what helped us the most. And sometimes I just want to vent, and I call her and I say, hey, I don't want to come across and say this the wrong way. Can you help me frame this conversation so I don't look like I'm bombarding him?
Yes.
How do I frame it to communicate correctly?
That's great.
And she creates that space for us.
That's wonderful.
To do that. Because sometimes I feel like we can go into these tirades because we're so frustrated.
Yeah.
It's always about how you frame that. And that's why I think coaching is so incredible for people, because it helps you set the tone, set the intention, get really clear with yourself.
Yes.
First.
Yes. And that includes regulating your system, regulating your nervous system, your emotions in that moment.
And keeping yourself accountable.
Yeah, 100%.
With how you show up in the relationship.
Absolutely.
And playing your role in it. It begins with you.
It begins with you.
Like, and having that awareness.
Yeah.
That how I narrate this or how I ask for this is also going to determine the outcome.
Absolutely.
And words have meaning.
And words have meaning. And the way that we express our words changes the meaning.
I want to tell you about something I've been using lately that's made me think very differently about how we take care of our bodies. Did you know your blood vessels have a special lining inside them that keeps everything running smoothly? It's called the endothelial glyphocallus. Don't worry, I can barely say it either. Basically, it helps protect your blood vessels and keeps blood flowing like it should. Now, why does that really matter? Because good blood flow means good heart, brain, muscles, everything is getting the oxygen and nutrients it needs to work its best. Whether you're working out, focusing on your desk, or just enjoying life, keeping your blood moving efficiently is what helps you feel energized and stay healthy. That's why I'm so excited about Calroy's Vascular Bundle. It combines two products together. They're like a powerhouse duo for healthy circulation, and they work to support your body at the source. Plus, Calroy is offering a discount when you get them as a bundle. It's been such an easy way for me to prioritize my health, and I think you'll love it as well. Check out the link below and use code Biohack-it. All right, let's get back to it. In this generation, though, you're seeing, obviously, you coach a lot of single people, you coach couples, like this constant era of like dating apps and endless swiping and endless options. What do you think this is doing to us as a culture?
So I got asked recently if I thought that, all the technology was sort of destroying us and whatnot. No, I think technology just reveals who we are, and that we are easily distracted beings who have a difficult time, depending on where you live in the world, culturally, with emotions, and we like to numb ourselves. And technology is a great way to numb ourselves. So if it weren't technology, it'd be something else. So I think it's more about understanding the human mind rather than just blaming dating apps or technology. Dating has never been easy.
Thank you.
There's always been ghosting.
Always.
Always. What dating apps, where we have to be careful, and I know a lot of people, like actually a good handful, who met the love of their lives on a dating app.
I know a few people as well.
Yeah.
So it works out.
Yeah. You just have to not get engulfed by any app in the endless swiping. One thing, though, that I think is that technology, and this isn't dating apps, it's just technology, has sort of corroded our understanding of what it means to make a connection with someone. And I think that there's a little bit or a lot of this idea that people are disposable. And I think there's other things that's happening in society that contribute to that. I mean, never have we ever been so isolated. Americans in particular used to be part of groups and used to do things and part of clubs and community. And I think that a lot of people are lacking community, and so we can be home alone on the dating app and we can see it as sort of like a game and so it takes away some of the humanity. It can.
I think you said that so well, that it takes away some of the humanity. So we have become this culture.
But it's us.
Yes, it's us.
Yeah.
We have started like getting very comfortable with this isolation.
Yeah.
And that isolation is actually what's impeding us from our happiness.
You don't have to even leave your home to get food, to get anything.
And that's also not healthy, because we've almost become reliant, and people think that just because I talk to somebody on social media means I'm getting that one-on-one connection.
Yeah.
And you're not.
No, you're not.
It's not the same thing. Sitting in front of somebody, having a conversation, having dialogue, breaking bread, having a drink is how you really bond.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's an energy exchange, there's an emotional exchange that goes on, and that cannot be done through social media.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I think dating apps could be phenomenal if you take them in the capacity that you need to take them.
Well, it's all about using technology rather than having technology use you.
Right.
And so you have to have the people who I've worked with who had success on dating apps, they had boundaries around it. They weren't on it endlessly. They certainly were not just messaging people endlessly. It's like we meet or we don't meet, and that's it.
Yeah. And then you move on from there.
On.
If it's not. What do you think about 69% of conflicts in relationships are perpetual problems, meaning that they'll never go away, like they're always going to be there?
Yes, and learning to accept that is really one of the keys to successful marriage or relationship. There are certain things you just have to say, we agree to disagree.
Right.
And I love you. There's just certain things that are just not going to go away.
Yeah.
And that's because you're two autonomous beings with your own belief system. I mean, do you and your husband have something that just is never? Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So we had this conversation, and I brought this up the other day, like literally a month ago. So it revolves around like my spending habits. He says, your spending habits give me a lot of anxiety. And I said, you know what, my love, that's why I work. Because I'm not going to change, right?
Yeah. And you do work.
I do work.
Exactly.
I said, I work. And you and I have different views on money, slightly different, and how I want to spend it. He's extremely frugal. My husband is very frugal. And thank God I married somebody extremely frugal. Yeah. So he's very frugal. And I'm not.
But here's the thing. You said, thank God I married someone frugal. So here's the key that I don't even think you realize. You appreciate where he's coming from.
Oh, I do.
You have a different view. You're not going to change, but you appreciate his perspective. And I think that is really where it's at. It's when couples can't appreciate, when it's like, okay, he's frugal, he's this, he's that. And then we start to hate on the person and we start to resent them when who they are is actually what you were attracted to. So it's really about appreciating the other person's perspective without making them wrong.
And you know, that's so important for you to say that, because if it was, I know that our family as a unit, so we both work, we have our individual careers and stuff, but our family unit is really strong because he's always looking out 10 steps ahead.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more of the big, go big or big at home personality, you know? I'm like, I'm just gonna hit it big and that's just it. And he's very much like chipping away every day, which is why I'm the entrepreneur in the relationship.
Yes.
And he's very into like stability.
Yes.
And so
But you like that about him.
Yes,
You
I could not
you
be
sought
with
that
an
out.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
No.
You sought out the stability.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want somebody who's
And he
stable,
likes that
consistency.
you.
Yes.
Because that actually reminds him, it kind of takes the edge off of him a little bit to be around that kind of energy in you.
And and he says it. He said, you're very risky. I'm a huge risk taker, and he's completely risk averse.
Yeah.
And we like that about each other because it allows me to check in with him to be like, hey, am I going to AWOL? And sometimes he looks at me, he's like, yeah, that's taking a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Maybe let's break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
But sometimes the way I am pushes him more.
Yes.
To be like, take a risk, babe, we'll be fine. Like, take that risk and it's actually going to work out really well.
Yeah.
So we balance each other. But I searched for that when I started getting to my healing work. I read this book, I think it was like 7 years ago when I was still single. I'd come out of this really bad relationship. And it was a Marianne Williamson book, A Return to Love.
Oh yeah, that was a profound book for me when I was going through my hard time. Yeah.
And I would gift this book to a lot of people after.
Yeah.
And that book kind of opened my eyes to this concept of looking at yourself and fixing the relationships obviously that we have, but also looking at what am I trying to attract into my life? What kind of person? What kind of personality? And am I being honest with myself, with what my needs are and what really I need in a partner? So I was very clear and being like, I don't need another Iman in this relationship. I need something different, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think my husband wanted to marry himself either. So we found this ground. In the beginning, I will tell you, it was really hard because we hadn't started doing all this work. And we used to bicker a lot. We used to fight all the time in our marriage early on. And then the more into plant medicine we got and the more, maturity we gained in our relationship, the more coaching we got, we started to really deeply appreciate each other.
Well, this is the thing that happens a lot in relationships is you two were attracted to each other because of that difference, because you represented something that's actually inside of him that's deeply repressed and vice versa. And so when people are very different that way and they find each other, there's usually a lot of chemistry, but then it turns to fighting because then when the honeymoon kind of fades, it's like, wait a second, how can I change you? I want you to be different. Then we start resenting the very things that our unconscious was attracted to begin with. And so the fact that the two of you can acknowledge that and talk about it is what makes a relationship work. What ends a relationship are people who are operating still in their unconscious and not in their self-awareness, and they're resentful of the person for being who they are. Literally.
You know, it's so funny you say that. So when we had this discussion and he's like, your spending habits. And I sat him down and I said, my love, we have to agree that I live within my means, but I'm not going to change, right? But this is what you also love about me, you know, that I am very clear. And I was very clear to communicate. I said, I don't want you to expect something of me that I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the same way I'm not going to expect something from you that you're not.
Yeah.
So you have to take me where I am.
Yeah.
And know that I always showed up as my authentic self. Yeah. Not some version of something that you want me to be, and vice versa. I'm not asking you to become somebody you're not ready to become.
Yeah.
You have to figure out that piece. And that's where we have to meet, because I don't want to resent you and you don't want to resent me.
That's a very important conversation to have.
And it's allowed us to have these really like direct conversations.
That's great.
So it level sets everything for us.
That's great.
You know? And kind of communicate that early on.
That's wonderful.
You know, 5 years, we would have been married this November, it'll be 5 years for us.
That's amazing.
How can couples like, there's an art to fighting, and hear me out on this. Some people fight really dirty, and that just erodes the foundation of any relationship.
Yes.
How can couples fight in a way that helps strengthen their relationship?
Well, one, to have a conversation and to be aware of your fighting styles, because our fighting styles usually come from childhood, and culture. So you might be with someone who likes to get very loud, and that's because they just grew up in a loud household. That could have been cultural too. And then you are someone where maybe you grew up in a household where no one talked about their feelings, and everything was swept under the rug. Well, what do you think's going to happen? They're going to fight, and it's not going to feel good. And the person who likes to sweep things under the rug is going to say, this person's too loud. They yell at me. The other one's going to say, you're avoiding me. So understanding how you were raised to view arguments is the first step. And then the second step is it's always going to be active listening. It's you take turns sharing, and you never use, some people might know this, but you never use you statements. You say I and we. And you talk about it taking radical responsibility for your perspective. This is how I see it. This is how it made me feel. And then the other person has to connect to how the other person feels and say, I don't want you to feel that way. Another thing is having some sort of heartfelt understanding, you know, having empathy. Empathy is a very important part of the process, but you can't have empathy when the other person is constantly making you the problem. So that's what it's so start first though with understanding, having a conversation about the different fighting styles. And, you know, if you're someone who you're very sensitive to someone when they raise their voice, you can just say, this is my request, that, you know, you take a time out, you come back, and we can speak to each other in a manner and, you know, in a certain tone. It's a negotiation. If someone has a tendency to kind of freeze or shut down, what I often help that person do is just take some deep breaths to come back into their body and just say, you know what? I just need like 15 minutes. I just need a moment to process. I just need a moment to just recalibrate, to like get my nervous system, like I'm really charged right now, but I love you. I'm coming back.
Yeah.
And then the other person has to allow that space. So it's understanding. Arguing better is understanding, do you go from 0 to 60 in your nervous system? Do you get overwhelmed really, really quickly? Are you quick to anger? Your job is to regulate that. And then active listening. There's more to it, but those are the main principles.
And how else do you think people can learn to communicate that will bring them closer together? Because people will have disagreements, right? So what else can you do that kind of like fosters that connection, that togetherness?
Well, there's a few things. One is, if you adopt the mentality, the mindset that it's you and your partner against the problem, not you and your partner against each other. Right. And that, in order to adopt that mentality, you have to have a conversation about your relationship being the most important thing that you share, and that you're going to protect it at all costs. Another thing is forgiveness, forgiving easily. Maybe sex after.
Yeah. How often do you think people should be having sex?
It depends on the couple.
Right?
Yeah, it really, really does. Sex doesn't mean the same thing for everyone.
Yeah.
So what is a lot of sex for one couple, or what is very little sex for one couple is just enough for another. So I don't really think there's any rule, but I do think though that it's important to make sure that you are connecting sexually in some way if you want to maintain that level of closeness. And so when you have a busy life, you're going to have to schedule it. And that's just the way
how it is. Yeah.
That's
And
just
talk
how it
about it and be like, hey, when you free, let's put something on the calendar to connect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're so busy doing you and then you
Yeah.
become like roommates rather than lovers.
Yes, and that's painful.
Yep.
That's a painful thing.
And so many times people wake up and it's so late in the relationship where
I
you're like,
know.
shit, what happened?
I
Like,
know.
where did we have this breakdown? Like, what went wrong?
I know. And then you're just not even attracted to the person anymore.
And in terms of people who are having maybe difficult conversations around sex, right? Because I went to this Goop and Health Summit in November, and there was this sex coach that was she was a communication coach that talks a lot about sex. I forgot her name. But she talked a lot about in her personal relationship, she met her husband, they were madly in love, having a lot of sex, and then all of a sudden she woke up one day and realized they're like roommates. How do you work back from that? How do you coach that? Or how do you bring up in a relationship like, hey, I think we should be having more sex or this or that?
So a lot of times when that happens, the couple, and this is nothing to be ashamed of, but the couple has fallen too much into a routine rut.
Yeah.
And there's not enough excitement. So what I always suggest is that they do something exciting together once a week that's a little bit on the edge of danger. Now, not danger in the sense that it's dangerous for you, disruptive to your life or dangerous to your health, but just a little bit of living on the edge, something that triggers a little bit of cortisol and dopamine that makes you feel like alive again, and you do it together. So just doing, I met with a couple recently, they were just friends, and they shared with me that every week they do something that they haven't done before. So they do something new together, something really novel. If they've never gone bowling together, then they go bowling together, and they make sure that they do that every single week.
Something exciting, just
Something
together.
new and exciting every week. But if you're really stuck in a rut, then you have to do something that's a little bit on the edge. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's jumping out of a plane. I don't know what it is. Just a little bit on the edge. Something that's really sort of not the norm.
Right.
That's gonna thrill them. It's gonna be thrilling, and they're
Right.
gonna do it together.
And build kind of almost bond over that experience.
Yeah, because you have that. All these dopamine is released, cortisol is released. You're thrilled, you're excited, and you're experiencing it together. It can be actually erotic in its own way.
And you and I previously, obviously, because we're friends, we'd spoken about how you and I truly value that women should have their own money,
Yes.
have financial independence. But what do we think for women who are listening that are more homemakers and raising kids at home,
I figure out a way to have your own money.
right? I strongly believe that. I have that embedded in me. But, I have friends who are not working or haven't worked in a long time. And
I have no judgment.
Yeah.
This is not my judgment.
Yeah.
This is not at all about that. The only thing that it's about is there are millions of women who are in positions where they cannot leave their
Yep.
spouse or their partner because they cannot afford to. And
or scared to give up the lifestyle.
Scared to give up the lifestyle, that's a choice, right? That's a choice. And I understand that, but then you have to decide what's more important to you. Having your freedom from this relationship that you claim to hate or be miserable in, or not give up the life. But worse to me is you won't be able to support yourself.
Right.
I don't want women to ever be in that position.
So have you heard of this whole thing about the trad wife?
Yes, the traditional wife. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so
the new thing. I
personally think it's a lie. It's a scam, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So this whole trad wife culture, right? It's a definition of a career. First, I want to explain that. Career is an occupation. This is literally, I wrote this out. Career is an occupation which is undertaken for a significant period of time, of a person's life, and with opportunities for progress. Careers can be defined in some other words that may have been heard, which are profession, occupation, employment, etc. trad wives are making money, Jillian. They're sitting at home baking sourdough bread, and they're content creators, a lot of them.
Good for them.
Like, good for them, right? No, and it's amazing. But I feel like this trad wife culture has started shaming women who work outside the house, shaming women for having careers, shaming women for, kind of being.
Is that what's going on? Are they shaming?
So this whole thing with a lot of trad wives, this thing is like trending, and all these girls are like, well, we want to be trad wives. I'm like, yes, but trad wives are earning money as well. And it's not that they're not making an income. So why are you, if somebody doesn't want to be a content creator and be a more traditional wife, and they decide to have an income and bring in revenue a different way, that doesn't mean that it's not a profession.
From what I understand, the trad wife is the woman who wants to cook meals for her husband. She wants to do the laundry. She wants to do all that stuff, and she's also earning.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a lot of these content creators sometimes make it feel like having a career outside the home that's kind of what is kind of portrayed and stuff.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, right?
Well, yeah.
So I got into this whole thing online with somebody because there was this thing posted about the Maha movement, and these women basically said that a big reason for the Maha movement, why kids are chronically sick today, is because so many women have left the house.
Yeah.
But I was just shocked by that and so taken aback, because I was like, well, that's not fair to say, because in any way you look at it, I don't think it's people are sick because women have left the house. I think it's because women need more education. We need education about choices. We need education about what to feed our children. We need education and options given to us.
For me, I just don't believe that there's just one way to live a life.
Thank you. And it was this whole back and forth that I got into, and I was like, guys, we can't blame women who choose to have a career and say the reason that their kids are not going to be as well raised is because they're out of the house. I know plenty of working moms who have phenomenal careers who still balance, their children being raised well.
I don't know if I could do it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, but God bless them. I don't know if I could balance the work that I do now and being a mom, and I don't know if I could, to be honest. But again, I don't think that the path, I don't think to blame people for the path, there's just not one way to live a life.
I just believe it comes down to the more we educate people about options and choices, because sometimes people are really busy to do the research themselves.
Yes.
The more they know,
Yeah.
the more they know about healthy eating options, the more they know about other things that they can do, the more they know about X, Y, and Z. It's a balance.
Yes.
So I just believe that this culture that's getting embedded that, hey, women should be more of the homemakers. No judgment if that's what you choose. It should be a choice, though. But
Absolutely.
to create this culture and just say, well, that's the way to do it, and that's what a traditional family should look like, and that's what's healthy. I personally don't resonate with that.
No, I don't.
That doesn't
I don't
work for me.
resonate with anything. I believe that relationships are nuanced. I believe our lives are nuanced.
Yes.
I don't believe there's one way to live a life.
Yeah.
I think that, I will never, ever agree with anyone who says that
So
there's
dogmatic about things.
dogmatic about
Anything.
how to live a life.
And so that's why I sometimes I think the trad wife culture is amazing, but I'm like, guys, we have to admit that you're also making money doing this. And it's amazing, but you're earning an income.
Yes.
Or this whole other concept of like stay-at-home girlfriends who create all this content. Like, you are content creators, but you should own it. You have a career. It's amazing you have a career.
To me, it's all part of the branding.
Right?
To me, they're just branding.
Right?
It's brand strategy. That's how I see it.
And they're doing a great job at it.
That's how I see it, as brand strategy.
It's just a different way to look at things, and why not?
Yeah.
We've talked about the dangers of like falling into dogmatic, like kind of boxes in relationships, right? What do you think women should be watching out for when like sometimes you take someone else's, like a partner's wants for you, and all of a sudden find yourself in this box and you're like, wait, I didn't want to be here to begin with. Because you're trying to please the other person.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to...
Look, our greatest fear is that we are not enough in some way, and that we're not going to be loved. And so many people, a very, very common pattern that is far from unique is, let me please the key people in my life so that I can be loved and accepted and okay. And part of our journey is to understand how to love and to contribute to other people's happiness, while simultaneously being who it is that who we believe ourselves to be. So whenever someone finds themselves in that position, they have to, instead of blaming the other, they need to ask themselves, why am I in this position? What have I been so afraid of? What do I really want? What am I willing to communicate?
And also willing to accept.
And willing to accept. Yeah.
And I think in a relationship, you tell me if this is true or not, it's always important to renegotiate as you go through life and you go through relationships, your roles and responsibilities.
Absolutely. To love someone long term is to go through many different iterations of who you are and who they are. And you do have to, because we change. And so what worked for us one year might change. And so that's the deal with long-term relationship. It's having these conversations regularly, and they don't have to be heavy and they don't have to be intense. They're just regular check-ins. Yeah, and things can change.
And negotiations.
You
bring what you need to the table. They bring what they need.
Yeah.
And you sometimes can agree on everything, but sometimes you can't. And you say, listen, this we'll agree to disagree on, and we're going to have to come back to this, but this is where I'd like to be met.
Yes.
These are my needs and wants.
Yeah.
And I think you do such a wonderful job with this book, obviously, which has been incredible, but even on your podcast to help women or men navigate these conversations about love.
Yeah, that's what I aim to do.
Jillian, I just adore you and thank you. I know you're so busy. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh my God, it's my
time
honor
to see me and just letting me talk about your incredible book and your work and celebrating you.
Oh, it's my honor. You are just such a lovely person. I love your podcast and it feels so good to be here.
Thank you again. Thank you for tuning in to Biohack-it. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a short review. It really helps us reach more listeners just like you. Follow us on Instagram at biohack-it for exclusive content and the latest updates. Remember, your health is in your hand and curiosity heals.